Oh my god, whose daughter is this? Hey baby, where's your mom?
The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight when Park Joon-ho found her. He hadn't meant to be in this part of Seoul. The Mapo district at 2 a.m. was not exactly prime territory for the Chungmyeong, the Blue Dragon Syndicate, but a deal had gone sideways 3 blocks east, and Joon-ho had dismissed his driver, needing the cold air to clear his head. At 23, he was already the youngest boss the Chungmyeong had ever installed. That came with pressure most men twice his age would have cracked beneath. He almost walked past the cardboard box. Almost. It was wedged between a closed convenience store and a rusted drainage pipe, partially sheltered by a plastic awning that did very little against the diagonal sheets of rain. What stopped him wasn't sound, not at first. It was movement. A small dark hand curling over the lip of the box, fingers spread wide like a tiny starfish reaching for something it couldn't name. Joon-ho stopped walking. He stood in the rain for a full 10 seconds, which, for a man who made decisions that ended careers and occasionally lives in under 3, was an eternity. Then he crossed the pavement, crouched down, and looked inside. She stared back at him. Big brown eyes, round as coins, framed by the most extravagant set of lashes he had ever seen on any human being. Her skin was deep brown and luminous even in the gray wash of the streetlight, her cheeks full and soft. She was wrapped in a yellow blanket that had gone damp at the edges, clutching a corner of it in one tiny fist. She looked to be about 3 years old. She was not crying. She was simply watching him with the grave, unblinking patience of someone who had already learned that crying didn't change much. Pinned to the blanket was a note, handwritten in shaky English. Her name is Amara. Please be kind. That was all. No explanation, no contact number, no apology. Park Joon-ho, head of the most feared criminal organization in northwestern Seoul, boss of 400 men, owner of 17 front businesses, and a penthouse that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, read those 4 words and felt something shift behind his sternum, something he hadn't felt move in a very long time. He looked at Amara. Amara looked at him. Then she reached up and grabbed his finger. Her grip was absurdly strong for someone her size. He tried to pull back on instinct. He didn't do this. He didn't do any of this, and she held on, and then, slowly, she smiled. It was a devastating smile. It rearranged her entire face. It made her look like sunrise. Joon-ho exhaled. "Ya," he said quietly, which was not really a word so much as a sound Koreans make when they don't know what else to say. He called his second-in-command, Shin Di-young, a broad, stone-faced man of 35 who had survived 2 assassination attempts and a federal investigation without blinking. "I need you to bring the car," Joon-ho said. "Already, the Mapo thing." "Forget Mapo, and bring," he paused, "a dry blanket." There was a silence on the line. A dry blanket. "Are you going to repeat everything I say, or are you going to move?" Di-young moved. The penthouse reacted to Amara the way a black tie event reacts to a golden retriever, with stunned, paralyzed confusion, slowly giving way to something dangerously close to delight. Joon-ho's housekeeper, Mrs. O, a 60-year-old woman who was afraid of absolutely nothing except bad produce, took one look at the child and immediately began reorganizing her entire emotional reality. Within 20 minutes she had produced a warm bath, a bowl of soft rice porridge, and a collection of opinions about what kind of monster abandons a baby in the rain, delivered in a continuous low murmur that required no audience. Amara ate the porridge with focused seriousness, both hands wrapped around the bowl. Joon-ho sat across the kitchen island watching her and trying to work out what exactly he was doing. His phone had buzzed 14 times in the last hour. The Mapo deal falling apart had ripple effects, suppliers to reassure, rivals who might interpret the chaos as weakness, lieutenants waiting for direction. He was supposed to be managing a crisis. Instead, he was watching a 3-year-old eat porridge. Amara finished, set the bowl down with a decisive clink, and looked at him. Then she slid off the stool. It was a long way down for her legs, and she handled it with impressive calm, patted around the island in her borrowed socks, and held her arms up at him. He stared at her. She didn't waver, arms up, patient, certain. "I don't," he started. Mrs. O appeared in the doorway, took one look, and made a sound that managed to convey both pick the child up and don't be an idiot simultaneously. Joon-ho picked her up. She was heavier than he expected, and she smelled like the rice porridge and the clean soap Mrs. O had used, and something underneath that was just her, warm and specific and impossible to categorize. She grabbed a fistful of his expensive shirt, settled her head against his shoulder, and closed her eyes. She was asleep in under 2 minutes. He stood in the kitchen of his penthouse, holding a sleeping 3-year-old while his empire waited for him, and he did not put her down. Di-young found him there 20 minutes later, standing perfectly still, expression unreadable. "Boss," Di-young said carefully, "the Busan crew is calling," and then he stopped, looked at the child, looked at Joon-ho. "Is that a baby?" "She has a name," Joon-ho said. "Amara." Another silence. "What are we doing with her?" Joon-ho looked down at the small, sleeping face tucked against his shoulder. The question was entirely reasonable. He had no answer that was reasonable. He had only the answer that was true. "She stays," he said. The news traveled through the Chungmyeong syndicate, the way all shocking news does, fast, distorted, and with increasing embellishment at every stop. By morning, the story had passed through 4 lieutenants, 2 drivers, a bookkeeper, and the woman who laundered money through a dry-cleaning chain in Hongdae. By the time it reached the outer rings of the organization, it had evolved from the boss found an abandoned child to the boss has adopted a foreign princess, and anyone who questions it loses a finger. The second version was not entirely inaccurate in spirit. Park Joon-ho had not slept. He'd spent the night in his study, phone pressed to his ear, systematically dismantling and reconstructing the Mapo situation with one hand while doing something he had never done before with the other, researching. Not rival organizations, not market gaps or territory maps. He was researching what 3-year-olds ate, what they needed, why they sometimes woke up screaming, and what the legal process looked like for emergency guardianship in South Korea. Mrs. O had found him at 5 a.m. still at his desk, surrounded by syndicate documents and browser tabs about toddler sleep schedules, and she had set a cup of tea in front of him without comment. That was the highest form of approval she offered. Amara woke at 6:30. She woke the way confident children do, completely, immediately, with 0 transition period between asleep and fully operational. She sat up on the couch where Mrs. O had arranged her, looked around the penthouse with wide, assessing eyes, and then called out a single word in a small, clear voice. "Hello." Not crying, not frightened, just announcing herself, checking if anyone was there. Joon-ho appeared in the doorway. Amara looked at him for a moment. Then she pointed at him with one finger, the gesture oddly formal, like she was confirming something she'd been thinking about. "You," she said. "Me," he agreed. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and held out her arms. He crossed the room and picked her up. It was easier the second time. The first real test came at 9 a.m., when Kim Sung-won arrived. Sung-won was the Chungmyeong's head of external relations, a smooth, sharp man who handled diplomacy with rival factions and had a talent for making threats sound like invitations. He was also, on a personal level, someone who had known Joon-ho since they were teenagers running errands for the previous boss. He was the closest thing Joon-ho had to a friend, which in this world meant he was the one person allowed to occasionally say what no one else dared. He walked into the penthouse, took in the scene, Joon-ho at the kitchen island with a small child in his lap who was systematically organizing pieces of fruit into a pattern only she understood, and sat down slowly across from them. "Okay," he said. "Say it," Joon-ho said, not looking up from his phone. "I haven't said anything." "You're thinking very loudly." Sung-won looked at Amara. Amara looked at Sungwon with the frank, boundary-free stare that only small children and very powerful people allow themselves. Then she picked up a piece of strawberry and held it out toward him across the island. Sungwon blinked. He took the strawberry. He ate it. "Okay," he said again, softer this time. "What's the plan?" "I'm working on it." "Joon-ho," Sungwon leaned forward, dropping his voice. "This isn't you can't just keep her. This isn't a dog. There are people who will see this as a vulnerability. Every rival faction, every. I know what they'll see. Then you know this puts a target on her." The temperature in the room shifted. It was subtle. Joon-ho didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't change his expression. But Sungwon had known him long enough to recognize the particular stillness that preceded something decisive. "Then we make sure," Joon-ho said quietly, "that anyone who looks at her as a target understands what happened to the last person who threatened something I consider mine." Amara, apparently bored with the adult conversation, patted Joon-ho's hand to recapture his attention. He looked down at her automatically. She pointed at the remaining fruit. "More," she said. He gave her more. Sungwon watched this and said nothing for a long moment. "I'll increase the building security," he said finally. "And we should move the car pickup rotation, vary the times and routes if she's going to be traveling with you." Joon-ho looked up. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, I'm doing it for her." Sungwon glanced at Amara again. Something in his expression had changed, the careful professional neutrality giving way to something more human. "She's something, isn't she?" "Yes," Joon-ho said, "she is." The twist nobody saw coming happened on the fourth day. Joon-ho had begun the process of filing for emergency guardianship through a lawyer the syndicate kept on retainer for sensitive matters. It was complicated. Amara appeared to have no documentation, no traceable identity, nothing that tied her to any registered parent or guardian in South Korea or any bordering country. She had appeared, essentially, from nowhere. Which meant someone had worked very hard to make sure she appeared from nowhere. That realization arrived in Joon-ho's mind at 11 p.m. on the fourth night, quiet and cold and significant. He set down his glass and pulled up everything his information network had gathered on recent arrivals, missing persons, and unusual movements through the district where he'd found her. What came back made him sit very still for a very long time. 3 weeks before he found Amara, a woman had entered South Korea on a Kenyan passport under the name Wanjaru Mathoni. She had stayed in a guest house in Mapo district for 9 days. She had then, according to the records his people had obtained through means he would not specify to any judge, made 3 phone calls to a number registered to a shell company that Joon-ho recognized immediately. It was registered to the Hwang faction. The Hwang faction, who were Cheongnyang's most dangerous rivals. The Hwang faction, who had been making moves in Mapo for months. The Hwang faction, whose boss, a man named Hwang T-Sik, had a known and documented preference for leverage, for finding the soft spots in powerful men and pressing until something broke. Joon-ho looked at the records. He looked at the name on the Kenyan passport. Then he pulled up the only photograph his network had recovered of the woman, grainy, security camera, partially obscured. But enough. Enough to see the eyes, round, dark, framed by extraordinary lashes. Amara's eyes. He stood up and walked to the room where Amara slept, Mrs. O having converted the guest suite with terrifying efficiency over the past 4 days. He stood in the doorway and watched the small shape breathing steadily under her blanket, a proper one now, soft yellow to match the original, because Mrs. O had noticed and replaced it without being asked. The woman in the photograph was Amara's mother. And she had placed her daughter deliberately, not randomly, not desperately, but deliberately in Park Joon-ho's path. Which meant she knew his route, knew his habits, knew he would be in Mapo that night, information that pointed to someone inside his own circle. And it meant the note, "Please be kind," was not a stranger's prayer thrown at the universe. It was a message from someone who knew exactly who he was and had chosen him anyway. The question that rearranged everything was why. Amara shifted in her sleep. Her small hand opened and closed around the edge of her blanket. Joon-ho stayed in the doorway. He had built his reputation on never being maneuvered, on seeing the play before it arrived, on being 3 moves ahead of everyone in every room. And yet here he stood, 4 days into something he hadn't chosen and couldn't classify, watching a 3-year-old sleep and feeling for the first time in years like the board had been set by someone else. He should be angry. He wasn't. He pulled out his phone and typed a single message to Sungwon. Find the woman from the Kenyan passport. Find her alive. Nobody touches her. Then he put the phone away and stood there a while longer. Whatever game this was, whatever Amara's mother had set in motion by choosing him, by placing this specific child in his specific path on that specific night, it had already worked in one regard. He was in it now, completely, irreversibly in it. And Park Joon-ho, when he committed to something, did not stop until it was finished. He looked at Amara one last time. She was dreaming. He could tell by the faint flutter of her lashes, that extraordinary fringe so much like her mother's. I'll find her, he said quietly to the sleeping child. I don't know what comes after that, but I'll find her. He pulled the door gently closed. In the hallway, his phone buzzed. The Empire was calling. There were deals and threats and the 1,000 moving pieces of a world that ran on power and fear. He straightened his jacket. He answered the call. But for the first time in 3 years at the top of everything, he was also thinking about tomorrow morning, about small hands and fruit arranged in mysterious patterns, and a smile that rearranged the light in a room. He was thinking about what Amara would want for breakfast.